The ballroom glittered with gold chandeliers and crystal glasses clinking, laughter echoing from every polished corner. Waiters in white gloves carried trays of champagne, weaving gracefully through the crowd of the city's elite. The air carried the faint notes of a string quartet tucked behind a curtain of roses. To onlookers, it was a night of glamour and power. To Ethan Calloway, it was a prison of soundless noise. He stood near the tall windows, posture perfect, his lean frame cloaked in a tailored black suit that fit him like armor. His storm gray eyes were trained on the glittering skyline, not the crowd that pulsed behind him. At 26, Ethan was striking, cheekbones sharp, jawline defined, dark hair perfectly combed. Yet no one approached him. They never did. He saw lips moving across the room. He could read them if he wanted, but it was exhausting to translate every smug joke, every shallow compliment. Tonight, he let them all blur together. It was easier to exist in silence. A young woman in red caught his gaze for a moment, whispering something to her friend. Ethan's eyes flicked to her lips. The deaf one. His throat tightened. He turned back toward the glass. The city lights sprawling beneath the tower. 1,000 glowing windows filled with strangers' lives. His father's laugh boomed behind him, though Ethan didn't hear it. He saw the way people leaned in, shoulders shaking with forced delight. Richard Calloway, billionaire tycoon, was magnetic even in his 60s. Broad-shouldered, silver hair styled immaculately. He commanded the room like a king among pawns. But he didn't look once toward his son by the window. Ethan knew why. Richard had always considered his son brilliant, but broken. Ethan could design systems, master business models, even predict trends with eerie accuracy. But his deafness was a scar his father never stopped seeing. Ethan swallowed the familiar sting. He was the heir who would never be enough. The silent shadow at the edge of every stage. A man in a navy suit approached, his lips moving. Ethan caught pieces. Your father. So proud, Foundation. He forced a polite nod. The man chuckled awkwardly and drifted away, realizing conversation with Ethan was one-sided. The moment passed. Ethan exhaled. Silence pressed in again. Across the city, in a building with peeling paint and buzzing fluorescent lights, a different rhythm thrived. The Brooklyn Community Center smelled faintly of floor polish and crayons. Kids darted down the hallways, their laughter echoing off cinder-block walls. Naomi Bennett knelt on the carpet, her cardigan sleeves pushed up to her elbows. Before her, a boy no older than 8 signed frantically, frustration tightening his small face. Naomi's hands moved fluidly, her fingers dancing with grace and patience. Breathe. Try again. I'm watching. The boy's tense shoulders eased. He took a shaky breath, then signed slowly, carefully, until the thought spilled out complete. The boy's grin burst wide, victory shining in his eyes. Naomi lived for these moments. At 24, she wasn't wealthy or polished. Her jeans were worn, sneakers scuffed, her tote bag heavy with books and notebooks. But her beauty radiated from within, dark brown skin glowing under the dim lights. Eyes full of depth, framed by neat braids pulled back from her face. Life had tested her resilience. She juggled 2 jobs, teaching sign language at the center and waitressing at a diner that smelled perpetually of grease. Her dream of finishing her degree lingered on pause, stalled by bills that never stopped coming. Yet Naomi carried herself with quiet strength. People underestimated her often. Too soft, too ordinary, too black in spaces that demanded she blend in. But Naomi knew invisibility could be a superpower. It let her notice things others didn't. And what she noticed, most often, was loneliness. When the session ended, she stacked her books into her tote. A coworker, Carla, leaned against the doorframe. You're magic with them, Carla said. Naomi laughed softly, tugging her cardigan tighter. I don't know about magic. Just patience. Carla's expression softened. Patience is a kind of magic. Naomi shrugged, embarrassed, then waved goodbye as she stepped out into the brisk autumn air. The evening smelled of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor on the corner. Her bus was late, as always, so she leaned against the lamppost, scrolling through job boards. Her phone buzzed with a message from Carla. Naomi, we just got a request for a last-minute interpreter tomorrow. High-profile event. Pay is triple. You in? Naomi blinked. Triple. That could cover rent and groceries for weeks. She typed back quickly. Yes. Where? A moment later. The Callaway Foundation Gala. You'll be shadowing their son. Easy money. Just smile, sign, and keep it professional. Naomi stared at the name. Callaway. The Billionaires. She'd seen them on news headlines, glossy magazines. It felt like another world entirely. But money was money. She slipped the phone into her pocket, whispering a prayer of thanks. She had no idea tomorrow would change everything. Back in the glittering tower, Ethan escaped the ballroom for the balcony. The cool night air brushed against his face, carrying the faint scent of roses from the floral displays inside. The city stretched beneath him, vast and endless. He leaned against the railing, eyes closed. In the silence, memories rose unbidden. A child Ethan signing desperately to his father, only to be met with a wave of impatience. Teenagers at prep school mouthing insults they thought he couldn't understand. The crushing loneliness of knowing everyone could speak to one another with ease. While he fought to be heard, the bitterness clenched tight in his chest. He opened his eyes, staring at the city below. Maybe this was all life would ever be. Wealth, silence, invisibility. Inside, laughter swelled louder. Ethan stayed outside, letting the chill bite at his skin, grounding him. Somewhere in the same city, a young woman walked home under the street lamps, a tote bag of books at her side, unaware that fate was already stitching their lives together. Tomorrow, his silence would finally be broken, not by pity, not by duty, but by recognition. For the first time in years, Ethan Callaway was about to be seen. The Callaway Foundation Gala was a spectacle designed to dazzle. Journalists lined the marble staircase, their cameras flashing as the city's wealthiest swept past in gowns that shimmered like waterfalls, and suits that cost more than most people's homes. The ballroom, transformed overnight, gleamed with towers of orchids, gilded candelabras, and a chandelier so massive it seemed to crown the entire event. Naomi Bennett had never seen anything like it. Her breath caught as she stepped inside, her black dress, simple, elegant, borrowed from Carla, feeling woefully understated against the glittering sea of couture. She clutched her interpreter's badge like a lifeline, her nerves humming. She had been told this was just another job, smile, sign, and keep it professional. But standing among billionaires, senators, and celebrities, she felt like an imposter. Carla's words echoed in her mind. Easy money. Naomi wasn't sure about that. She smoothed the fabric of her dress and scanned the crowd. She'd been given one clear instruction: find Ethan Callaway and stay by his side. She didn't know what he looked like exactly, just that he was the heir, the only son, and deaf. She moved cautiously through the sea of diamonds and champagne flutes, trying not to stare at the opulence. Waiters glided past with trays of oysters. A string quartet's music floated, muffled by the buzz of conversations Naomi couldn't quite follow. Then, near the tall windows, she saw him. He stood apart, tall and rigid in his black suit, framed by the city lights behind the glass. His posture was controlled, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, stormy, restless, that made Naomi's chest tighten. She knew loneliness when she saw it. Her heart pounded. That must be him. She took a breath and approached. No one seemed to notice her as she crossed the floor. She was invisible here, just another staff member blending into the background. Ethan didn't turn when she stopped beside him. He stared out at the skyline, hands tucked into his pockets, a figure carved in solitude. Naomi hesitated, nerves prickling her skin. Then she lifted her hands and signed, "Hello." Ethan froze. Slowly he turned to her, his gray eyes sharpening as if trying to confirm what he had just seen. Naomi signed again, more clearly, "I'm Naomi. I'm here to interpret for you tonight. Nice to meet you." For a long moment, Ethan just stared. His chest rose and fell once, sharply. Then his hands moved, hesitant but precise. "You know sign language." Naomi's lips curved into a small smile. She signed back, "Yes. I teach it. I'll stay with you tonight, if that's okay." Something shifted in his expression. The rigid wall he carried so effortlessly cracked, just slightly. His gaze softened, though suspicion lingered. Most people don't bother. Naomi's throat tightened. She signed, "They should." The silence between them deepened. But it wasn't empty. It thrummed, alive, charged. Ethan studied her, as though waiting for the inevitable pity. The careful tone he always received from strangers. But Naomi didn't pity him. She simply saw him. And Ethan felt it. Across the room, Richard Calloway noticed. His eyes narrowed briefly at the sight of his son speaking with a young black woman in a plain black dress. But the room demanded his attention, and he turned back to his donors with a politician's smile. Ethan's gaze flicked briefly toward his father, then back to Naomi. "Why are you here?" He signed. Naomi replied, "They asked me to interpret for you. But if you'd rather be alone, I can." He shook his head quickly. "No. Stay?" The words were sharper than he intended. But there was urgency in them, a need he couldn't mask. Naomi nodded softly. She didn't move closer, but she stayed. For the first time all evening, Ethan felt something shift inside him, like oxygen filling starved lungs. As the night unfolded, Naomi followed him through the gala, interpreting conversations when people addressed him directly. Most of them spoke around him, not to him, their words polite but dismissive. Naomi caught the flicker of pain in Ethan's jaw each time it happened. At one point, a woman dripping in diamonds leaned toward Naomi instead of Ethan. "Tell him I adore his father's speech," the woman said, flashing a smile. Naomi signed the words to Ethan. His eyes hardened. He signed back curtly, "Tell her thank you." Naomi did, though her gut twisted. She wanted to add, "She should have told you herself," but she didn't. Not yet. Later, near the bar, Ethan finally signed. "This is what it's always like. They pretend I'm not here." Naomi hesitated, then signed, "I see you." The words hung between them, heavy and raw. Ethan blinked, his composure faltering. For a moment, he wasn't the billionaire's son or the broken heir. He was simply a man, desperate to be seen. His hands moved slowly, almost uncertainly. "Why are you different?" Naomi's chest ached. She signed, "Because I know what it feels like to be invisible." Their eyes locked. The noise of the gala blurred, the glitter and champagne fading. In that suspended moment, Ethan felt the world tilt. No one had ever spoken to him like this. Not even through sign, but through truth. When the speeches began, Naomi stood at Ethan's side, interpreting quietly. His father took the stage, commanding the room with booming charisma. Applause followed every line. Ethan watched, his face unreadable, though Naomi caught the flicker of detachment in his eyes. The morning after the gala, the Calloway mansion was silent, except for the distant hum of staff, moving like shadows through its endless halls. The house was massive, columns rising like sentinels at the entrance, marble floors so polished they reflected the chandeliers, walls lined with art collected from every continent. But for Ethan, it was nothing more than a gilded cage. He sat at the breakfast table, untouched food before him, eggs cooling on porcelain, toast cut into neat halves, orange juice beating with condensation. He didn't move. His eyes were far away, replaying the night before. Her hands, her words, "I see you." No one had ever said that to him and meant it. Not his teachers, who pitied him. Not his father, who expected him to be more. Not the people at the gala, who smiled politely and dismissed him as soon as the conversation became inconvenient. But Naomi had looked straight into him, as if she understood. His hands twitched restlessly in his lap. He needed, to see her again. And yet the thought filled him with fear. People like her didn't belong in his world. She would see the cracks in him, the flaws his father worked so hard to disguise. He clenched his fists. Better to let it go. Better to bury it. Richard Calloway swept into the room like a storm. Silk tie already knotted, cufflinks gleaming. His presence filled every space he entered. He stopped when he saw Ethan still seated at the table. "You should have been up hours ago," Richard said, his voice firm. His words weren't signed. He never bothered, but Ethan could read his lips perfectly. "I was awake," Ethan replied, his own hands moving deliberately. His voice, when he used it, was low but uneven, shaped by years of speech therapy. He rarely spoke aloud. It cost him effort. But today, he wanted to remind his father he could. Richard's jaw tightened at the sound. He set down his briefcase, his expression clipped. "You embarrassed yourself last night," standing around like a statue. You're the heir to this empire. People are watching. Ethan's chest burned. His hands signed sharply. They weren't watching me. They were ignoring me. Richard's eyes flickered with annoyance. Then make them notice. Stop hiding behind excuses. The words sliced deep. Ethan pushed back from the table, his chair scraping across marble. He grabbed his coffee and stormed out, leaving his father to fume in silence. Across the river, Naomi folded laundry in her small apartment. The scent of lavender detergent filled the room. But her mind wasn't on the clothes. It was on him, Ethan Calloway. She had lain awake most of the night replaying their exchange. The way his gray eyes had softened when she signed to him. The way his shoulders, tense with years of rejection, had loosened with a single phrase, "I see you." It should have been just a job. She'd promised herself she wouldn't get pulled into her clients' lives. But Ethan was different. Something in him resonated with her own loneliness. Her own battle to be visible in a world that often refused to see her. Still, she couldn't afford to get lost in daydreams. He was a billionaire's son, heir to an empire, surrounded by power and scrutiny. She was a community center teacher juggling overdue rent notices. They were worlds apart. Her phone buzzed on the counter. It was her mother. Naomi sighed and answered. "Baby, did you eat?" Her mother's voice came warm and familiar. "Yeah, Mama. I'm fine," Naomi said, folding a towel. Her mother hesitated. "I know that tone. You're carrying something." Naomi chewed her lip. For a moment, she considered confessing everything. Instead, she said, "Just tired. Work's been busy." "You're doing good work," her mother said. "Don't forget, what you give those kids, what you give people, it matters." Naomi's throat tightened. Her mother didn't know how much that echoed what Ethan had felt last night. She blinked hard, willing the tears away. After they hung up, Naomi stood in her quiet apartment, laundry forgotten. She wanted to see him again. But what would that cost her? What if she became just another story whispered about the Calloway heir? She shook her head. Better to let it go. That afternoon, Ethan tried to bury himself in work. He sat in his study, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. His laptop glowing with endless numbers and charts. His mind was sharp. He could spot patterns faster than his father's entire boardroom. But focus eluded him. He kept seeing her hands, hearing her words. A knock interrupted him. His assistant, Michael, stepped in. "Your father wants you at the charity dinner tonight." Ethan's jaw tightened. He signed quickly. "No, I'm not going." Michael hesitated. "You know he won't like that." Ethan looked away. He didn't care. What he couldn't admit was that the thought of another room full of people pretending he didn't exist made his stomach twist. He thought of Naomi again, her steady gaze, her patient smile. For a moment, hope flickered. But then he remembered who he was. The silent heir. The broken son. He shut his laptop with a snap. Naomi spent the evening at the diner, balancing trays of burgers and milkshakes. Her smile practiced though her feet ached. Regulars cracked jokes. Teenagers snapped selfies. And her boss barked orders from behind the counter. Life here was loud, messy, real. Yet even in the bustle, she felt the echo of last night. Ethan's stillness, his silence, the storm in his eyes. When her shift ended, she sank onto the bus seat, forehead against the window. The city lights blurred past, neon smears across glass. She pulled out her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly. Her thumb hovered over Carla's contact. She could ask about another Calloway assignment. She could find an excuse to see him again. Her heart thudded. She locked the phone and shoved it back into her bag. No, she couldn't. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of the bus lull her. But deep down, she knew some connections weren't so easily erased. Back in his mansion, Ethan stood on the balcony, the city stretching endlessly before him. His fingers drummed against the railing, restless. For years, he had convinced himself he didn't need anyone. Loneliness was safer than rejection. Silence was safer than being misunderstood. But now, he wasn't so sure. The memory of Naomi's hands moved through his mind like music only he could hear. And for the first time, Ethan wondered if silence could hold more than emptiness. If it could carry connection. Still, he shook his head. She didn't belong in his world. And so, both of them, two souls who had finally found a glimpse of Recognition chose resistance. For now, the Callaway mansion was buzzing with preparations. Caterers streamed through the halls. Decorators fussed over floral arrangements. And assistants whispered urgent reminders into phones. Another charity initiative was launching that week, a literacy program. Richard Callaway wanted to present as the crown jewel of his foundation. Ethan dreaded it. He stood in his study, watching through the window as delivery vans unloaded crates. His father's words from 2 mornings ago still echoed in his mind. Make them notice. Stop hiding behind excuses. He wanted nothing more than to disappear. But Richard had already made sure he wouldn't. That afternoon, Michael, Ethan's assistant, appeared in the doorway holding a clipboard. He looked sheepish. Your father insisted I hire an interpreter for the event. Michael said carefully. He doesn't want a repeat of last time. Ethan's eyes narrowed. I don't need one, he signed sharply. Michael shifted uncomfortably. He was very clear, Ethan. He already approved someone. Ethan's chest tightened. Who? Michael hesitated. Her name is Naomi Bennett. She was at the gala. The air left Ethan's lungs in a rush. Naomi. Images flashed unbidden, her hands signing I see you, her warm eyes steady on his. That fragile spark of hope. He'd spent days trying to bury it. Now fate had shoved her right back into his world. His hands moved abruptly, almost defensive. Cancel it. I can't, Michael said, voice apologetic. She's already confirmed. Ethan turned away, jaw clenched. He told himself it didn't matter. She was just staff. This was just another event. He could endure it. But deep down, fear twisted with something else. Anticipation. Naomi smoothed her blouse nervously as she stepped out of the cab at the mansion gates. She had never been this close to the Callaway estate, its sprawling lawns, its fountains lit with golden light, the mansion itself looming like a palace. She clutched her tote bag tighter. Carla had called her that morning, excitement in her voice. You impressed them at the gala, Naomi. They want you back. And the pay? Even better. Naomi had agreed before her heart could object. She needed the money. Rent was due, and the diner had cut her hours. But as she walked up the marble steps, a knot of unease coiled in her stomach. She had told herself to forget him. That spark between them was nothing. A job was a job. But her body betrayed her. Her pulse quickened at the thought of seeing him again. Her palms damp with nerves. A staff member guided her through gleaming corridors to a smaller reception room. Mr. Callaway will be down shortly, the woman said before disappearing. Naomi stood alone, staring at the oil paintings of long-dead Callaway ancestors. She adjusted her blouse for the 3rd time, willing herself to calm down. The door opened. Ethan stepped inside. For a heartbeat, neither moved. His gray eyes locked on hers, unreadable but burning. Naomi felt her throat go dry. Then his hands moved. You again. Naomi swallowed. She signed back carefully. Your father requested me. I didn't know until today. His lips pressed into a line. He signed, you shouldn't be here. Naomi's chest tightened. She forced her hands steady. Do you want me to leave? His eyes flickered, conflict warring inside them. Finally, he signed, no. The silence between them was taut, filled with everything they weren't saying. Naomi shifted her weight, trying to breathe evenly. She reminded herself she was here to work. Nothing more. Later, in the grand hall where the literacy program would be announced, Naomi stood beside Ethan as guests streamed in. She interpreted quietly when people addressed him, though most still avoided direct conversation. One man, a board member with a smug smile, leaned close to Naomi. Tell him the foundation is lucky he's here. Naomi translated. Ethan's reply was curt. Tell him the foundation is lucky my father is here. Naomi relayed the message with a polite smile, though her lips twitched with suppressed amusement. The board member didn't catch the sting. As the event continued, Naomi noticed subtle shifts in Ethan. He no longer stood as rigidly apart. When she signed a sarcastic aside about a donor bragging too much, the corner of his mouth almost curved upward. When she teased that he looked bored during his father's speech, his eyes glimmered with something close to humor. For the first time, she saw a different side of him, dry, sharp, alive beneath the weight of silence. During a lull, Naomi leaned closer, her hands moving casually. "Do you always hate these events?" Ethan's response was immediate. "Yes." His expression softened. "But tonight is different." Naomi's breath caught. She pretended to focus on the stage, her hands still. Her heart, however, thudded wildly. When the event ended, Ethan walked her to the door. The mansion's corridors were hushed now, staff cleaning up remnants of the night. Naomi adjusted her tote bag, unsure what to say. Ethan signed suddenly. "Why do you do this work?" She hesitated, then signed, "Because I want people to be seen. I grew up knowing what it felt like not to be. Sign language gave me a voice. I want others to have that too." Ethan studied her, his gaze piercing. Slowly, he signed, "You're different from anyone I've ever met." Naomi's chest ached. She lifted her hands, then stopped. What could she say? That she felt the same? That she had tried to forget him, but couldn't? Instead, she signed simply, "Good night, Ethan." She turned and walked away before the weight of her feelings betrayed her. Ethan stood in the corridor long after she'd gone, his heart pounding. Forced proximity had cracked the walls he'd built, and for the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted to rebuild them. The mansion was quiet again the next morning. After the event's glitter and noise, the silence seemed heavier than usual, pressing against Ethan's chest as he sat in his study. He opened a book, a leather-bound classic. He'd read a dozen times, but the words blurred. All he could see was Naomi's face as she had signed. "Because I want people to be seen." Her words burrowed deep, stirring something old and raw. Memories. Ethan shut the book abruptly, but the past had already crept in. He was 10 years old again, sitting at a long dining table. Silver cutlery gleamed against crystal glasses, the smell of roasted lamb filling the room. His father entertained a group of associates, their laughter booming through the hall. Ethan sat at the far end, small and stiff, his hearing aids buzzing faintly. He tried to follow the conversation, eyes darting between lips, straining to catch the rhythm of words. But their voices blurred into noise, fragments slipping through his grasp. He raised his hand once, tried to sign a question. No one looked. He tried again. Nothing. Finally, his father's voice cut through. "Ethan, sit still. Don't interrupt." Heat had burned his cheeks as laughter swelled again. He lowered his hands, his stomach sinking like stone. Invisible. Always invisible. Ethan snapped back to the present, his fists clenched on the desk. He hadn't realized tears pricked the corners of his eyes until he blinked them away. He hated remembering. But Naomi's words, her presence, made the memories impossible to bury. For the first time, though, he wondered if maybe being seen wasn't impossible after all. Across town, Naomi sat at the community center, helping a little girl named Jada sign the word butterfly. Jada's small fingers fumbled, but her eyes lit up when Naomi demonstrated again, slow and patient. At last, Jada grinned as her hands formed the shape correctly. "That's it," Naomi said warmly. "Perfect." The girl's mother watched from the doorway, tears brimming. She mouthed, "Thank you." Naomi smiled, though her chest ached. She loved this work, loved giving kids a voice. But it didn't pay enough. Her rent was climbing. The diner barely covered groceries, and the center relied on donations that trickled too slowly. She packed up after class, lingering by the bulletin board where a notice hung. Community center facing closure without additional funding. Naomi bit her lip. She thought of Ethan's world, millions, spent on flowers and chandeliers. For a single evening. If even a fraction of that money came here, the center would thrive. But people like Ethan didn't belong in this world. And people like her didn't belong in his. Or so she told herself. That evening, Naomi received an unexpected message. A request to return to the Callaway mansion for a private meeting. She almost said no. But something pulled her, curiosity, maybe, or the memory of his eyes when he'd signed, "You're different." She arrived to find Ethan waiting in the garden, the twilight casting silver shadows across the manicured hedges. He was nervous. She could see it in the way his hands flexed at his sides. "Thank you for coming," he signed. Naomi nodded. "You wanted to talk?" He hesitated, then signed slowly, deliberately. "You asked why I hate events. This is why." His hands moved faster now, the words pouring out. "When I was a child, No one listened. I tried to speak, but they turned away. I tried to sign, but they didn't care. I grew up surrounded by noise, but always in silence. Invisible. Naomi's heart clenched. She could see the boy he once was, lonely, desperate, unseen. She stepped closer, her hands steady. You're not invisible, Ethan. Not to me. His eyes burned, his throat working. For a moment, his composure cracked, and she glimpsed the raw ache beneath. Naomi wanted to reach for him, to offer touch, comfort, but she held back. Instead, she signed softly. Do you know why I learned sign language? Ethan shook his head. Naomi drew a slow breath. My younger cousin was born deaf. Her parents didn't know how to communicate with her. They thought she'd adapt. But she was frustrated, lost. She used to cry at night because no one understood her. Her hands faltered, but she pressed on. I promised her I would never let her feel unseen again. I learned sign language for her. And when I saw how it gave her joy, I knew I wanted to give that to others. Ethan's gaze softened. He signed carefully, you carry other people's pain. Naomi gave a small, rueful smile. Maybe, but it also gives me strength. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, heavy but not empty. It was filled with everything they were finally beginning to share. They sat together on a stone bench as the night deepened, stars scattered above. Naomi pointed upward, fingers tracing constellations, telling him stories of myths tied to the stars. Ethan listened intently, watching her hands move like poetry. For the first time in years, he felt light. He wanted to hold on to it, to her. But fear still lingered. Fear of what this meant, what it could cost. So instead of confessing the storm inside him, he signed quietly, thank you for seeing me. Naomi smiled, her eyes warm. Always. And in that fragile moment, something deepened between them, a bond born not just of attraction, but of shared wounds and unspoken understanding. The next few days unfolded differently at the Calloway mansion. Ethan, once a ghost moving silently through gilded halls, found himself waiting for moments Naomi might appear. She had been asked back for additional interpreting work, his father, pretending it was to polish the family's image. But Ethan suspected. Richard had noticed the rare calm in his son whenever she was around. For Ethan, it wasn't just calm. It was oxygen. On a quiet afternoon, Naomi found him in the library, a cavernous room lined with shelves that stretched to the ceiling. Dusty ladders stood ready to reach forgotten corners, and sunlight streamed through tall windows. Ethan sat curled in a leather chair, a book open but unread in his lap. Naomi tilted her head. What are you pretending to read? She asked aloud, then signed the same words with a teasing smile. Ethan glanced at the cover, then back at her, his hands answering. Tolstoy. But he's boring today. Naomi laughed, the sound ringing in the still room. She dropped into the chair across from him, tucking her legs beneath her. I thought billionaire sons read only business journals and Forbes articles. Ethan raised an eyebrow, hands moving with mock offense. Stereotypes. I like stories. Stories, huh? Naomi leaned forward. Then tell me one. He hesitated, then signed. Once upon a time, there was a boy who lived in a glass cage. Everyone looked at the cage, admired it, but no one saw the boy inside. Naomi's breath caught. She wanted to reach across the table, touch his hand, tell him he wasn't that boy anymore. Instead, she softened her smile. And then, Ethan's eyes glimmered as his hands slowed. And then one day, someone noticed him. Naomi swallowed hard, her throat thick. She forced a playful grin. Sounds like a fairy tale. Maybe, he signed, gaze steady. But not all fairy tales have happy endings. Naomi leaned closer, her hands firm. This one will. Their eyes locked, something unspoken thrumming between them. Later that week, Naomi invited Ethan to the community center. He had never set foot in her world, but she was insistent. You'll blend right in, she joked as they walked through the center's modest doors, her tote bag slung over her shoulder. Ethan looked around, wide-eyed. The walls were painted with colorful murals, children's drawings taped haphazardly over peeling paint. Laughter echoed from a classroom down the hall. The air smelled of crayons, disinfectant, and fresh popcorn from a fundraiser machine. It was chaos, and somehow, it was beautiful. Naomi led him into a room where a dozen children sat in a circle. She introduced Ethan with ease. "This is my friend Ethan. He knows sign language too." The kids perked up, curious. Ethan stiffened and used to being on display, but Naomi nudged him gently. He knelt down, his hands moving. "Hello? My name is Ethan." Gasps and giggles erupted as the kids signed back. Their small fingers fumbled, but their faces shone with excitement. One boy tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Show us more." Ethan glanced at Naomi, who smiled encouragingly. And for the first time in years, he taught, not numbers in a boardroom, but stories with his hands. He signed animals, actions, even jokes. The kids squealed with laughter when he mimed a stubborn cow refusing to move. Naomi watched from the corner, her heart swelling. She had never seen him like this, unguarded, animated, alive. He wasn't the silent heir anymore. He was just a man connecting, giving, being seen. Afterward, as they walked back outside, Ethan signed with a small, almost shy smile. "They didn't ignore me." Naomi's throat tightened. She signed back, "Because you let them see you." Over the next few weeks, their worlds intertwined more. Naomi found herself at the mansion, reading with Ethan in the library, teasing him in the garden, or interpreting when his father forced him into board dinners. Ethan, in turn, appeared more often at the community center, helping kids learn, even fixing a broken swing one Saturday morning. They began to share small joys. Naomi introduced him to greasy diner burgers, the kind that dripped down your hands, laughing when he looked scandalized at the mess. Ethan introduced her to classical piano, his long fingers gliding across keys in a hidden music room. Naomi closed her eyes, swaying to melodies she could feel more than hear. They discovered humor between them, inside jokes signed with the twitch of a hand or the roll of an eye. Naomi teased him about his brooding stares. Ethan teased her about the stack of romance novels by her bed when he spotted one in her tote. Slowly, laughter threaded through the cracks where silence had once reigned. One evening, after helping lock up the community center, they walked together under the soft glow of streetlights. Naomi sighed, hugging her coat tighter. "This place means everything to me. It's more than a job. It's family. But it's always one rent payment away from closing." Ethan studied her, his jaw tense. "How much do you need?" Naomi blinked. "Ethan, tell me," his hands insisted. She shook her head firmly. "No, I didn't bring you here for money. I brought you because I wanted you to see my world." His eyes searched hers, frustration and admiration mingling. He signed slowly, "You're stubborn." Naomi grinned. "And you're bossy." For a moment, they just stood there, smiling at each other in the quiet night. The city hummed in the distance, but here, it was just them. Ethan lifted his hands hesitantly. "Naomi, when you're here, everything feels less heavy." Her breath caught. She stepped closer, her hands rising to reply, then froze. Fear crept in. If she crossed this line, there would be no going back. So she signed softly instead, "I feel it too." The air between them pulsed with what neither dared speak aloud. Back at her apartment later, Naomi sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought of Ethan's guarded smile, his hands trembling slightly when he signed those words. She wanted to believe this could work, that love could bridge their worlds. But she knew how fragile it all was. One misunderstanding, one cruel whisper from his father's circle, and it could shatter. Still, she couldn't deny the truth. Against all odds, she was falling for him. And judging by the way he looked at her, he was falling too. The Callaway mansion buzzed again, this time for a high-profile gala celebrating the launch of a new corporate venture. For Richard Callaway, it was another chance to parade his empire before investors. For Ethan, it was another cage. But this time, he wasn't alone. Naomi had been asked to interpret once more. And though her nerves twisted, she agreed. Their connection had deepened so much in recent weeks. How could she refuse him now? Still, she felt the weight of the evening as she stepped into the glittering hall. Her dress simple but elegant. Around her, women dripped in diamonds. Men boasted of stock prices. Laughter rang hollow under chandeliers. Naomi had never felt more out of place. Ethan found her almost immediately, his eyes softening when they met hers. He signed across the crowd, "You look beautiful." Naomi's cheeks warmed. She signed back discreetly, "You don't look so bad yourself." For a while, The night passed quietly. Naomi interpreted conversations for Ethan when people bothered to engage. More often, though, they ignored him, and she felt his frustration growing. She wanted to squeeze his hand, to remind him he wasn't alone, but professionalism kept her at his side. Silent comfort in the storm. Then it happened. Near the center of the room, a sharp laugh rose. A socialite Naomi had seen before, tall, perfectly coiffed, with eyes like knives, leaned toward a circle of guests. Her words carried just enough to reach Naomi's ears. It's tragic, really. All that money, and the heir can't even speak properly. No wonder his father hides him away. He'll never run the company. Naomi froze. Her stomach churned. She glanced at Ethan. He had caught enough, his jaw clenched, eyes burning. Before Naomi could comfort him, the woman's gaze slid to her. And now, apparently, he's taken up charity projects. A little pet from the community center. How quaint. Laughter rippled around the group. Naomi's cheeks burned. She wanted to shout, to defend herself, to defend him. But Ethan was already moving, his hands trembling as he signed furiously, "Let's go." She followed him out, her heart hammering. They slipped into an empty corridor. The sounds of the gala muffled behind closed doors. Ethan spun on her, his eyes stormy. "Do you see now?" He signed sharply. "This is what happens. They will always see me as broken. And you," his hands faltered, "they will see you as nothing more than." Naomi's chest tightened. "Stop," she signed, her own hands trembling. "Don't let them define us." Us. Ethan's movements were harsh, jagged. "There is no us, Naomi. We live in different worlds. I was stupid to think." The words slashed deeper than the socialite's cruelty. Naomi felt them like a physical blow. Her vision blurred with hot tears. "Do you really believe that? After everything?" Ethan's face twisted, torn between anger and pain. He wanted to take the words back, but fear choked him. Fear of dragging her into his cage, of hurting her more by keeping her close. So he stayed silent. Naomi's hands dropped to her sides. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here." She turned and walked away before he could stop her. That night, Naomi sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling, her chest hollow. Her phone buzzed with messages, Carla checking in, her mother asking if she was okay, but she ignored them all. She replayed Ethan's words, "There is no us." She wanted to hate him, but she couldn't. She knew his pain, knew the years of rejection carved into him like scars. Still, knowing didn't make the wound in her heart any less sharp. Tears slipped down her cheeks. For the first time in weeks, she felt truly invisible again. Ethan, meanwhile, stood alone on the mansion balcony, the city lights blurred by unshed tears. His father's party raged on below, but he couldn't face it. Not after the look in Naomi's eyes when he pushed her away. His hands shook as he signed into the night. As if to her, as if she could see. "I didn't mean it. I was afraid." But fear had already cost him the one person who made him feel seen. The days that followed were a blur of silence. Naomi didn't return his calls, didn't answer Carla's messages about more interpreting work. She buried herself at the community center, pouring her pain into the kids, smiling through the ache. Ethan retreated deeper into himself, avoiding even Michael. His father barked orders, oblivious to the storm inside his son. The mansion felt colder than ever, each room echoing with the absence of the only voice Ethan had truly heard. Both of them, in different corners of the city, asked the same question: was it ever real? And for the first time since they met, the answer felt uncertain. Naomi walked through the community center late at night, long after the kids had gone home. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting pale shadows on the murals she loved so much. She stopped in front of one, a painted tree with handprints for leaves, each one a different color. Her own palm print, smaller then, was still on the trunk from when she first came here as a child. The center had always been her anchor, her safe place. But tonight, even here, the ache in her chest followed her. She sat on the floor, pulling her knees to her chest, letting the silence stretch. "There is no us. The words echoed like a cruel refrain. She knew Ethan hadn't meant them. Not really. She'd seen the torment in his eyes, even as he pushed her away. But intention didn't erase pain. He had chosen fear over her. He had chosen the voices of others over the bond they'd built. Her phone buzzed. Her mother again. Naomi ignored it. Then, with a heavy sigh, finally picked up. "Baby," her mother's voice was gentle. Naomi swallowed hard. "Hi, Mama. You sound tired." "I'm fine." A pause. "No, you're not." "What happened?" Tears welled despite Naomi's resistance. "I thought I'd found someone who saw me, who made me feel like I mattered. But maybe I was wrong." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said softly, "Seeing someone doesn't always come easy. Naomi, sometimes people are so blinded by their own pain. They push away the ones they need most. Doesn't mean it wasn't real." Naomi pressed her forehead to her knees, sobbing quietly. Her mother's words rang true, but they didn't erase the question burning inside her. Was she strong enough to risk her heart again? Across town, Ethan sat in the dark of his study, the city skyline glowing through floor-to-ceiling windows. The gala had ended days ago, but the venom of those whispered words still lingered in his mind. He'll never run the company. She's just a pet. His fists tightened. He hated them. He hated the world that judged him for his silence. Hated his father for never defending him. Hated himself for proving them right when he pushed Naomi away. But most of all, he hated the empty chair across from him, the one she should have been sitting in. Michael entered quietly, setting down a stack of papers. He studied Ethan for a long moment before saying, "You miss her." Ethan looked up sharply, his hands moving with stubborn denial. "It doesn't matter." Michael didn't flinch. "It matters. I've worked for you long enough to know when something breaks through those walls of yours." "She did. And you're miserable without her." Ethan's throat worked. His hands moved slower now, trembling slightly. "I hurt her. She deserves better." Michael nodded. "Maybe. But she also deserves the truth. Don't let fear speak for you again." The words landed like a stone in Ethan's chest. He thought of Naomi's eyes the night she left, the hurt. Yes, but also the hope she'd carried until the very end. He pressed his palms together, breathing deeply. He had spent his whole life letting silence define him, letting fear keep him invisible. Was he really going to let it steal this too? For the first time in days, resolve flickered. Naomi arrived home after midnight, exhaustion weighing on her bones. She dropped her bag on the couch and headed for the shower, desperate to wash away the day. A knock at the door stopped her. Her heart thudded. It was late, too late for visitors. She approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. Her breath caught. "Ethan." He stood in the hallway, shoulders tense. His suit rumpled as if he'd come straight from another event. His eyes were shadowed, but his gaze on the door was steady. Naomi's hand hovered on the knob. Part of her wanted to throw it open, to fall into his arms. Another part wanted to bolt it shut, to protect herself from more pain. She stood frozen, torn. Then, slowly, she opened the door. They stared at each other, the hallway quiet except for the hum of distant pipes. Ethan lifted his hands. "I'm sorry." Naomi's throat tightened. She folded her arms, fighting tears. "Sorry doesn't erase what you said." "I know." His hands moved desperately. "I was afraid. Not of you. Of losing you. Of ruining you with my world." Naomi shook her head, tears spilling. "You don't get to decide that for me." His hands stilled, then rose again, trembling. "I see you, Naomi. Even when I tried to push you away, I saw you." And his movements faltered. For once, words failed him. Naomi's chest heaved. Part of her screamed to slam the door, to end it before she shattered again. But another part, the part that remembered his laughter with the kids, the softness in his eyes when he signed beautiful, ached to believe him. She wiped at her cheeks, signing slowly. "If you want me in your life, Ethan, you can't keep running. You can't keep hiding behind silence." He nodded, fierce determination in his gaze. No more hiding. The air between them trembled with the weight of choice. Pride or vulnerability. Fear or truth. Finally, Naomi stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," she whispered. And Ethan did. The next morning, Naomi woke to the smell of coffee. She blinked groggily, padding into the kitchen where Ethan stood awkwardly, fumbling with her old coffee maker. His suit jacket was draped over a chair, his tie gone, his sleeves rolled up. He looked wildly out of place in her tiny apartment, and yet, heartbreakingly right. He turned when he felt her presence, his eyes softening. "Morning," he signed with a small, tentative smile. Naomi's lips twitched despite herself. "You don't know how to make coffee, do you?" He shook his head, sheepish. "Not without a barista." The small exchange eased the tension, but only for a moment. Because the truth hung between them, heavy and unfinished. Naomi leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You came here. You said you didn't want to hide anymore. But what does that mean, Ethan? For us? For you?" Ethan's hands stilled over the coffee pot. He turned slowly, his jaw tight, then began to sign with deliberate care. "It means I'm done letting my father's world define me. Done letting people silence me. I don't want to be invisible anymore. And I don't want to lose you because of fear." Naomi's breath caught. "But," Ethan hesitated, his eyes darkening. "There's something you should know. Something I never told you." Her stomach tightened. "What is it?" He looked away, guilt flickering across his face. His hands moved slowly, like the words weighed 1,000 pounds. "When my father invited you to interpret, it wasn't for me. It was for appearances. He wanted to show investors how inclusive we were becoming. You were supposed to be a prop." Naomi's chest constricted. She had suspected something, but hearing it confirmed cut deep. Ethan's eyes burned with shame. "I should have told you sooner. But I was afraid you'd walk away before. I had the chance to show you that you mattered. That you weren't invisible to me." Tears stung Naomi's eyes. She turned away, pacing the small kitchen. "So I was right. I didn't belong in that world." Ethan moved closer, desperate. "No, they were wrong. My father was wrong. You belong with me, Naomi. Not because of their world. Because of ours." Naomi shook her head, torn between anger and longing. "Do you even hear yourself? You've lived your whole life under your father's shadow. How can you promise me anything if you're still chained to him?" The question struck deep. Ethan's hands dropped to his sides, his chest heaving. For years, he had let his father's empire dictate every part of his existence. Every silence, every exile, every moment of shame. But Naomi's words pierced through, forcing him to confront the truth. He couldn't have both. Not his father's approval and his own freedom. His hands lifted again, fierce now. "Then I'll break the chain." Naomi froze, staring at him. "What do you mean?" "I don't want the company. I don't want the money. Not if it means losing myself. Not if it means losing you." Naomi's breath hitched. This was more than defiance. This was sacrifice. "You'd give all of that up?" "I already have nothing without you." He signed, his movements trembling with intensity. "Money can't buy what you've given me, my voice. My heart." Naomi's tears spilled freely now, her chest aching with the force of his confession. Before she could respond, a sharp knock rattled the door. Both of them stiffened. Naomi wiped her cheeks, opening it cautiously. Richard Calloway stood there. His tailored suit was immaculate, his expression cold as granite. He barely spared Naomi a glance before focusing on Ethan. "So this is where you've been hiding." Ethan's shoulders squared, a storm brewing in his eyes. Richard stepped inside without invitation, his voice like ice. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? Walking out in the middle of a deal? Bringing this," he waved dismissively toward Naomi, "into our world as if it means nothing." Naomi flinched, but Ethan moved instantly, stepping between them. His hands rose, sharp, cutting through the air. "She is not nothing. She is everything you never were. Kind, strong, real. And I will not let you use her." Richard's eyes narrowed. "You think you can throw away the Calloway name for some charity case?" The insult snapped something in Ethan. Years of silence, of humiliation, of being told he was broken, boiled into fire. "I am not broken," he signed fiercely, his chest heaving. "I am not your shame. And I will never be your puppet again." Naomi's heart pounded, watching the confrontation unfold. Ethan, once invisible, once silenced, was finally roaring in his own language. Richard's face reddened. "You'll regret this." Ethan's hands moved with finality, his eyes unflinching. "No, The only regret I'd have is losing her because of you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Richard turned sharply, his shoes echoing against the floor as he stormed out. The door slammed behind him, leaving the apartment trembling in its wake. Naomi stood frozen, her hand pressed to her mouth. She looked at Ethan, his chest rising and falling, his hand still trembling. "You really meant it," she whispered. He turned to her, his eyes raw, unguarded. "I choose you, Naomi. Always." Naomi's sob broke free as she crossed the space between them, throwing her arms around him. His embrace was fierce, desperate, as if holding her anchored him to the earth. For the first time in both their lives, the chains of silence shattered. The apartment was still, trembling with the ghost of Richard. Calloway's rage when Ethan finally loosened his grip on Naomi. He stepped back just enough to see her face, his eyes searching, vulnerable. Naomi brushed a tear from his cheek with her thumb. "You stood up to him." Ethan nodded, his hands lifting. "For you. For me. For us." Her heart swelled. For so long, she'd been told she didn't belong, that her voice didn't matter. But standing here, with Ethan, she knew this was where she belonged. The following weeks were not easy. Richard made good on his threats. Ethan was cut off from certain accounts. Board members whispered about his reckless defiance, and the tabloids spun stories of the disgraced heir. But Ethan didn't waver. With Michael's help, he began building something new, an independent foundation to support deaf education and community centers like Naomi's. Naomi was by his side, not as a token, not as a prop, but as a partner. She continued teaching at the center, but now with more resources than ever. Ethan funded programs, brought in specialists, and even began learning how to advocate publicly through interpreters. His silence was no longer a weakness, it was a weapon for change. One afternoon, as Naomi finished teaching a group of kids, she found Ethan waiting in the doorway. He wore no suit today, just a simple sweater, his hair a little mussed. He signed slowly, deliberately, so the kids could see too. "You are all seen. You are all heard. Don't ever forget that." The children's faces lit up. Jada, the little girl Naomi had once taught to sign butterfly, raced forward and hugged him. Ethan's eyes glistened as he returned the embrace. Naomi stood back, her chest aching with pride. He was becoming the man he was always meant to be. That evening, Naomi and Ethan walked home together under the glow of street lamps. The air was cool, leaves crunching beneath their feet. Naomi glanced at him, teasing. "You gave quite a speech today." He smirked. "Better than making coffee." She laughed, nudging him playfully. Then her smile softened. "You've changed, Ethan." He stopped, turning to her. His hands moved with quiet certainty. "No, I finally became myself. You helped me find him." Her throat tightened, emotion swelling. "And you helped me believe love could be real." They stood there, words and silence weaving into something whole. Then Ethan reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. Naomi gasped softly as he opened it, a simple silver band. Nothing extravagant, but beautiful in its sincerity. His hands trembled slightly as he signed, "Naomi, will you be my forever?" Tears blurred her vision. She covered her mouth, then nodded fiercely. "Yes, yes, Ethan." He slid the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around him, laughing through tears. For the first time, both of them felt complete. Months later, the wedding was small but radiant. Not a glittering spectacle, not a performance for the wealthy elite. It was held at the community center, surrounded by the kids, their families, and a few true friends. Naomi walked down the aisle in a flowing white dress, her mother wiping tears in the front row. Carla squeezed her hand before she reached Ethan, her eyes sparkling with joy. Ethan stood waiting, not in a tuxedo of his father's choosing, but in a suit that was simple and his own. His eyes shone when he saw her, his hands already moving. "You're beautiful," he signed. Naomi smiled through her veil. "Always and forever," she signed back. Their vows were spoken and signed, every word accessible. Every promise etched not just in sound, but in movement. When they sealed it with a kiss, the room erupted with cheers and fluttering hands. The deaf applause that filled the air with love. Later that night, as the celebration quieted, Naomi and Ethan slipped outside. The stars stretched above them, just like the night in the garden when they first began to share their truths. Naomi leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Do you remember the first thing I ever said to you?" Ethan smiled faintly, his hands forming the memory. "Because I want people to be seen." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "And now look at us. Seen, heard, together." He turned to her, cupping her face gently. "You gave me more than a voice, Naomi. You gave me love. My forever." She kissed him softly, the night wrapping them in its quiet blessing. And for the first time in both their lives, they were not invisible. They were whole. They were home.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.